Good morning, everybody, and you're very welcome. As Emma Jane said, this is the fifth in our series, Healthy Aging, Healthy Planet. And this is the webinar series that we've been promoting or organising in partnership with Irish Doctors for the Environment. And the series aims to explore that sweet spot of areas of health where we can take measures for our own health, which will improve our own health and the health of the planet. So my name is Christine Magee, and you'll meet Rod Crichton later in the webinar. We're both from Bold. And also at the webinar is Orla Gaynor, who is here operations officer, I should say, for Irish Doctors for the Environment. And let me just tell you a little bit about Irish Doctors for the Environment before I go on to tell you a little bit about Bold. So the Irish Doctors for the Environment are an NGO and a charity, and they consist of healthcare professionals, not just doctors and students. And they aim to create awareness, interest, and implement actions around environmental health and the impact it has on our patients' health. And I think I'll let Orla fill in a little bit more detail about them at the end of the webinar, if that's okay. And we just wanted to let you know a little bit about Bold, because Bold is a group for older people, over 60s, we're calling older people who are concerned about climate justice and obviously the climate crisis, and who think there is a place for older people in this movement and for our voice and the power that we can bring. We've been working in a variety of ways over the last 4 years. Some of it will have been around protest and advocacy. We've been involved in the climate march under the Bold banner. We've also been advocating TDs and all the obvious advocacy sort of stuff. We've worked in two areas. We've sort of drilled down a bit in two areas. Particularly, we've focused on energy poverty, retrofitting, warmer homes. And the other area is this area where there's an overlap between climate and health. And the other sort of really important thing is we've been building relationships and partnerships with age organisations such as Age Action and Age and Opportunity, and Age Friendly Ireland, community organisations such as Men's Sheds, and then the environmental organisations, obviously Irish Doctors for the Environment, Friends of the Earth, and the wider group, smaller groups that Friends of the Earth support as well. So today, we'll be opening up another world of how everything obviously is connected. I think as you go on in this work, you realize how everything is connected and how dental health and oral health and dentistry practices are so relevant to holistic, healthy aging and the health of our planet. We see as well that prevention and early intervention, as with everything, is better for our health and for the health of our planet, less expensive and big interventions. But we also see there's a justice component to this, because access to preventative and early intervention is not available to many people on low income in Ireland. And this is, as with everything, health, climate and justice, they are intertwined. Before I hand over to Rod, to David McReynolds, who we're very delighted to have here, I just give you a sense of the format. So David McReynolds will present, and then Rod will also do a short presentation on more of the environmental aspects, and that will probably take about 40 minutes. And then we'll actually have an opportunity for people to break into a couple of groups just to talk about some of the stuff that they've heard about, but also maybe some ideas about how we can take actions to make a change in this area. And then we'll come back. We won't actually get feedback from the groups. We'll just take that as an opportunity for people to get to talk to each other and to digest some of it. We'd ask you to put some of the feedback in the chat box, but we'll actually use that time after that to have questions. So we'll be asking you as the talk goes on, maybe you might pop your questions into the chat box if that's something you feel comfortable doing, so we can be making sure we put the questions together and really make use of that time towards the end of the webinar, and then we'll close in plenty of time for 12:30. So I'd like to hand over to Rod now, so he can introduce David and himself. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Christine. So I'm very honoured to be able to present Dr. David McReynolds, who is a consultant trained prosthodontist with many postgraduate qualifications in research and practice. He's presently embarking on a part-time PhD with the Irish Longitudinal Study on Aging, which is acronym TILDA. TILDA is a large-scale, nationally representative longitudinal study on aging, the overarching aim of which is to make Ireland the best place in the world to grow old. On a personal note, I was most lucky to have David work for me as an associate and locum at various times in my practice. He is a superb dentist, having done a We Can Rebuild You Steve Austin job on my teeth. And if you know what I'm referring to there, then you are very much in Bold's target audience. Settle back and enjoy what will be an illuminating presentation by Dr. Reynolds, marred only by the fact that I will be adding a few of my own thoughts at the end. Thank you, David.
Good morning, everybody. I shall just share my screen as I have prepared some slides for you all. So here we go. We'll get it all set up. And we'll click on full screen. Okay, so good morning. As Rod said, I'm David McReynolds, and the title of today's presentation is Dental Health as Overall Health. I'm coming at this as obviously a very environmentally conscious individual as well, but mainly as a consultant trained prosthodontist. And a prosthodontist is a type of specialist dentist who helps people replace missing teeth and helps people get a good bite and a good functional dentition that they can work with, but also looks good and is pleasing to them. I'm also a visiting research fellow with the Irish Longitudinal Study of Aging, and what I'm mainly going to share with you today are some of the insights that I've had about the aging of the dentition and how that relates to your overall health. So I'll just start by explaining what a clinical academic is. So I am a prosthodontist by background, and I am doing research. I'm now in year 5 of a part-time PhD, but I'm a clinician who actually treats people every single day. And my main cohort of patients would be, I guess, defined as older Irish adults. It was interesting to hear Christine say that for her it's over 60 is the threshold. I hope it isn't insulting, but in Tilda they say from 50 and above is our cohort of older adults. So it's always a tricky way to define that, isn't it? And yeah. So anyway, I'll move on from that. These are the types of patients that I would see. So this is a gentleman on the left-hand side of the screen who came into me. He's in his 50s and he had a very unusual bite that maybe about 1% of the population have. He wanted his teeth to be reconstructed and he wanted very white teeth, and that's what we gave him, you know. But that was a dental reconstruction involving crowns that may have taken approximately 3 years to do. Another classic case is a gentleman here who was in his 60s, mid-60s I would say, and he was missing many teeth, and the teeth that remained were very loose, and that's a very common problem among older adults. And for him, I performed a dental reconstruction with dental implants and got him a fixed dentition there, and again, that would be a classic example of what a prosthodontist does. And then finally, this is a lady who gave us permission to share her images, and here she was approximately 75 years old. She was missing many of her back teeth and her front teeth were very broken down and decayed. And she underwent a dental reconstruction. That took about 3 years to complete. So she's about 78 in the image on the right. But I think this is a great example of how your teeth can radically change how you look and how you present to the world. And I'm sure everyone understands as well that how you present to the world, it has an effect on how people treat you and things like that. So that's one of the many rich ways in which your dental health can enhance your overall health. So taking it away from individuals and looking at the population, I'll just show you some graphs here, but at the bottom line here in the red is the population of the EU. And you can see from 2012 to 2021, it's holding fairly steady. But the green line here is the Irish population. So Ireland's population is growing. But if you look at the yellow line, that's Ireland's population age 65 and over, and it's substantially increasing. So there's a decline in death rates and a decline in birth rates also. That's what's going on in Ireland. So people are living for longer. But there are fewer young people in the country. There's some projections going from 2022 up to 2042 that would show that the proportion of older adults, let's say age 75 to 85 and 85 plus, is actually increasing quite substantially. So this is going to have some knock-on effects. And again, some projections. So sorry that the text is a little small, but I'll read it for you. There's a thing called ADLs, activities of daily living, which would be things like walking, bathing, and feeding. And some people have trouble with those. There's things called IADLs, instrumental activities of daily living, like shopping, managing your finances, cleaning. People struggle with those too. And there's some projections that would suggest that we expect there to be a five-fold increase in the number of people with problems with ADLs and IADLs as we go into 2040. So basically, Ireland has challenges, and we need to think about those challenges now. So Irish adults are living for longer. They'll have increasing needs as they age. The demographic transitions that are not going to arrest or reverse within our lifetime, or my lifetime. And we need to plan now for how sustainable Ireland's healthcare, welfare, and social care systems are as we proceed into the future. And an evidence base is required to inform our policy. And that's what TILDA is for, which is the Irish Longitudinal Study of Aging. So it's an omnibus survey that collects extensive data on health, wealth, and well-being, and it's been doing so for about 20 years. And it provides population representative data on older adults with a view towards informing our evidence base, our policy making, and our decision making. What it's really good for is to help determine what is typical and what is normative for aging. So what does normal aging look like? You know, sometimes your hearing is a little bit worse than it was and your vision isn't as good. But what's actually problematic? When are we deviating into problematic aging that can be helped, you know? So with the TILDA study, we would have brought participants through a circuit that looked like this. And they went through a series of rooms in a hallway, and they would have had cognitive assessments and measurements of their height and their weight, their grip strength, and their heel bone ultrasound, so we can get an idea of their bone density. We would have looked at pulses, blood pressures, oxygen saturation, how quickly people can stand up and their lightheadedness goes away, because we all get a little lightheaded when we stand up. We looked at things like walking speed and also microbiomes, so what kind of bacteria are living in our guts and so on and so forth. I actually had a dental room set up here, and I carried out a dental assessment according to the WHO, the World Health Organization's survey methods. So I actually personally collected data on 1,090 older adults. The mean age was 68 and a half. There was a slight female skew, so women came more than men. And I collected, believe it or not, about 270,000 points of data on Wave 6 alone. So I'm going to share with you some insights there. So that's what our dental room looked like. And I was privileged to have met older adults from every corner of the Republic of Ireland. I also went to the International Association of Dental Research in San Diego, California, there just a month or two ago to present some of our findings. And I was very honored to have won a first place award for some of the work that I'll show you today. So I'll show you exactly what got me there with that is there are some graphs here, and very simply, the blue is for men, the pink is for women, and these are box plots with kind of distributions. And we've got three age groups, which we're going to call youngest old, middle old, and oldest old. So youngest old is 50 to 64, middle old is 65 to 74, and oldest old is 75 plus. Very arbitrary. And on the long axis here, we're looking at the number of teeth people have. And I'm putting a red line here to say that that's where 20 teeth is. And 20 teeth is important because that's what the World Health Organization says is the minimum number of teeth a person needs to function well with their dentition. And what we're seeing here is that for the most part, people in the youngest old and middle old are doing well, but there are substantial numbers of people who have fewer than 20 teeth and zero teeth, in fact. And as we get to our oldest old, age 75 plus, the majority of the population have fewer than 20 teeth. This is another set of graphs that looks at the number of biting pairs, which is a little different. So when you bite together, some of your teeth on the top and the bottom touch, and some of them don't. And that's really important, actually. And what the World Health Organization says is that you need 10 teeth to touch for you to have good function. And we're seeing here now, if you look at it like that, the middle old actually fall below the threshold nearly most of the time, and the oldest old a lot of the time. So there's very few of us that are actually maintaining these thresholds, let's say. They can also be categorized. So basically, what I was looking at on the left is fewer than 20 teeth. Up to 60% of the population over 75 don't have 20 teeth or more. And if we look at the number of biting pairs on the right-hand side of the screen, about 70% of the population aged 75 plus don't have 10 biting pairs. And you'll notice that those numbers increase radically between 65 to 75 plus. And what I think is happening there is that people have dental problems, but sometimes your dental problems have no symptoms. And it's only when things start to have symptoms in the mouth is when it's getting to a very late stage. And often at that late stage, people need to have teeth out. So that explains what's going on there. So that introduces a concept called oral hypofunction or oral frailty, which is sometimes said to be a reversible age-related decline in oral function. And there's several criteria we use to define that. So impaired masticatory performance, so people can't chew well. They say that they can't chew well. They have fewer than 20 teeth. The fact that they're using a denture. They feel their mouth is dry. And crucially, they actually start to go out less and go out socially less because of their teeth. They might not engage with the dentist and they might not brush their teeth as much as they used to. Maybe people think that it doesn't matter anymore, or maybe people have lost faith in trying. So that's a state that people are in. And then my research looks at frailty, which is an overall health concept. So I'm going to talk to you about that because the word frailty gets spoken about a lot, but a lot of people don't really know what it is. So frailty is basically sometimes called a fuzzy concept because of that. And people would say, I don't know what frailty is, but I know someone is frail when I see it. And I'm going to show you some images now. So this is, I hope you don't mind, an older gentleman, let's say, on the left-hand side of the screen. He looks like an older gentleman, but I don't think someone would say that he looks frail. Whereas if I showed you this image on the right-hand side of the screen, you'd say that is also an older gentleman, but there's something about this older gentleman that we would say looks frail, okay? Frailty is basically a research concept and it's characterized by slow gait, which is a slow walking speed, muscle weakness, weight loss that was not intentional, low physical activity, and exhaustion. And it overlaps a lot with a concept called sarcopenia. And sarcopenia is this state of having low muscle mass. So you've loss of muscle strength, loss of muscle mass, and loss of muscle function. So my research actually looks at oral hypofunction on one side and to see does it relate to overall frailty, I should say, on the other side. And we haven't quite finished our analyses yet, but what I can say is that in Ireland there is a relationship, and internationally it has been shown in Japan, in the UK, and in South America that there's a relationship between people's teeth, if they have a state of oral hypofunction, that seems to predict that they become frail sooner. We don't know exactly why, but we think it might be because people don't go out as much, so they don't use their physical body as much and they get weaker physically because of that. And we also think that maybe people's diets shift. So there is an idea, I would say, of life course, and this is what I want to show you now to empower you. So the graphs on the left show grip strength for men and grip strength for women. And basically, as we go from the age of 0 up to, let's say, the age of 90, our grips increase and we get stronger until we get to about the age of 35 to 45. And that's when we're at our peak physical strength. But some of us, well, we all lose strength as we age, that's normal. But some of us are losing our strength rapidly. And what I have to show you here is that if you are someone, an older adult, let's say, who's 80 and you weightlift, you can maintain strength that would correspond to the average 35-year-old at their strongest. So I want to empower you to say that that this is actually something that is very modifiable, and it would be friendly to the environment to modify it as well. On the graph on the right, this is looking at bone mass. And again, very similarly, people's bone mass increases. When you get to about 35, you have the most bone mass that you'll have. And this is maintained until about 45. Women get a bit of a double whammy because of menopause, so the bone mass can decrease. However, once again, I would say to you, this is very modifiable with things like exercise and diet, but exercise is the main thing. So I'll talk to you about that in a moment. So what leads to frailty? Basically, a sedentary lifestyle, maybe energy malnutrition. What does that mean? That means not eating enough, but it often means eating too much energy in the diet. So that's coming from carbohydrates and fats rather than from proteins and minerals and vitamins. Protein malnutrition is a big one. So a lot of people don't eat as much protein as you probably would need, actually, believe it or not. Especially as we get older, our needs for protein increase quite dramatically. And micronutrient deficiency is a big problem. What is going on there is that if you look at Irish diets, we eat a lot of processed food and what could be described as junk food, and that isn't good for the environment either. But if you eat whole foods, your micronutrients and your vitamins start to increase in your blood. And we know that people with micronutrient deficiencies get frail sooner. So there's this concept called life course strategy, and it basically says the younger you start, but believe it or not, it goes all the way to mother when she's pregnant, right? So a mother who weightlifts, I'm not joking, will have a baby who has more muscle mass, and that baby will live longer than a baby who was born to a mother that doesn't weightlift. So it can go as far back as that. But you might say, well, that doesn't help me now because for me, for example, I'm 36, right? So what I would say is that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is now. So don't worry, it's never too late, and you can absolutely completely change your life course trajectory. That's my message to you. And I'm going to show you this. I think this is just wonderful, this slide here. So on the left is an MRI of a 40-year-old triathlete's thighs. So you're looking at their thighs and cross section. That's their bone, that's their muscle, and on the outside is their fat, their body fat. And you can see it looks like a Sunday roast, for lack of better words, all right? So on the middle image is a 74-year-old sedentary man, and you can see the bone, you can see the muscle, and you can see the fat, and it looks very different. There's very little muscle, there's a lot of fat, and the fat is actually going inside into the muscle. And that's a very unhealthy appearance. But I'm going to show you this one now. This is a 70-year-old triathlete on the right who has the same muscle mass and even less body fat than the 40-year-old triathlete. So what I mean to say to you, ladies and gentlemen, is that no matter what age you are, if you were to begin exercising, and you don't have to be a triathlete, by the way. You could start by walking to the grocery store instead of driving and carrying your groceries home instead of putting them in the boot of the car if you can. And if you can't do that, you can start by standing up in your chair 10 times and sitting back down again. It can be as simple as that. And you will increase your muscle mass and you will increase your bone mass if you do that. And that, I think you'll agree, is friendly to the environment. It doesn't take any carbon footprint to do that. I'm going to show you another one. This is a paper from an Irish university, in fact, in Athlone, and it shows a 92-year-old who was a four-time indoor champion rower, but they're 92 and they're still rowing in the gym. This 92-year-old athlete demonstrated remarkably fast oxygen uptake kinetics, akin to the values of a healthy young adult, indicating well-developed and/or maintained cardiopulmonary function. The high values for cardiopulmonary function, muscle mass, metabolic efficiency, and maximum power output may infer the pliability of these systems to maintain high functionality at an advanced age. That's a very complicated statement. You find this in research that people talk in tongues in research because you don't want to be too forceful just in case you're wrong. But I'm going to tell you now, my mother is 77 And yesterday, she called me up on the phone to tell me how she was weightlifting in the gym in Derry in the northwest of Ireland. And when I go home to Derry at Christmas, I meet my 82-year-old dad, and we go to the gym together and we weightlift. And he's 82 and I'm 36. So it's not too old. And that's what I'm going to say next is, and maybe I hope this isn't controversial now, but I'm talking the talk, but I also walk the walk. And I wanted to show you these images. I don't mean to show off. I'm showing this from the perspective of medical imagery to show you what's possible. So this was the images where I'm looking a little skinny and maybe normal. I was 29 years old, and the images that are very highly stylized are photo shoot images of me at a gym 5 years after starting weightlifting, and you can see a radical difference in my muscle mass. Now, these days with generative AI, people say, is that not an AI generated image? So I wanted to show you that without the photographer's lighting, those are the kind of images that I've got at home. So I'm looking at this as a healthcare clinician and my muscle mass. It's an increase in what I had, you know. And for interest, I weighed about 63 kilos on the before images and I weighed about 65 kilos on the after images. So I'm only 2 kilos heavier by the scale. But I hope what you can see is that there's a radical difference in the composition of my weight, that the muscle mass has increased and the body fat has come down. And again, it doesn't, to lift some weights and put them back down again is not particularly damaging to the environment, I would think. Okay, so taking this into the next message, a lot of people will say to me, okay, well, I'd like to do that, but I can't really eat. As a dentist, and Rod, I'm sure will attest to this, you'll have patients that would come into us and say, well, I have very few teeth and I can't eat a steak. I want to eat sausages and mashed potato and butter, is what people will often say. And that's probably not so great for the environment either, and it's not great for your health. But Rod and I will have definitely seen in our time patients with zero teeth who can eat steaks. But so that's not really the point. I suppose what I'm saying there is that your ability to chew is definitely got something to do with your psychology and how determined you are. So that's one message I want to get across today is to be determined no matter what life throws at you. And if you want to eat a steak because that's not because it's environmentally the reason at the moment, but because it's a nice treat once in a while, then you can do that. But if you can't, there are ways to get a good diet otherwise, even if you don't have good teeth. So what the best evidence would say for adults aged 65 and over at the moment is that basically you should be eating about 300 grams of white meat a day. So we're talking about chicken or fish. Could be white fish. It's probably a good idea if your cholesterol is good to have whole eggs every day, maybe two of them, that they're full of nutrition and fat-soluble vitamins and minerals. It's a really good idea to have a handful of unsalted, unprocessed mixed nuts. That's a very healthy plant source of healthy fats and healthy protein. And you should then also focus your diet on plant-based foods after you get your protein. So it's particularly important for older adults to get their protein, I would say, because muscle mass is a big problem. And once you start having falls and breaking bones, your environmental footprint is going to increase because of that. So I would say there's a balance to be walked there between the food choices you make and what's actually good for your physical health. But as I say, the next thing is that you should have at least 5 to 7 fruits and vegetables each day, and you should make them as different to each other as possible. So different colored fruits and vegetables from as many different families of fruits and vegetables as possible. And legumes are particularly good for being a source of healthy minerals, but also healthy proteins and healthy carbohydrates. So beans and peas, things like your haricot beans, your kidney beans, lentils, pulses, those kind of things. And then once you've sorted your protein as the main priority, your plant-based nutrition is your second priority. The third thing you should fill your diet with is your whole grains, your oats, your brown rices, your brown pastas. And again, I was on holiday. And this image on the right is the fish that I ate on my holiday, which is a dorada with some salad. So I talk the talk and I walk the walk. So I'm not just saying you should do this. It can be done, and this is actually a delicious meal. So you might say, well, my teeth won't support that, David. I can't chew nuts. You might say that. Well, nutrition can come in many forms. So you can mince the meats, you can blend fruits and form smoothies. It's important that if you were to do that, that you don't add sugar and things like that. But there's ways to get your nutrition in. You can have nutritious soups, and again, you just have to be a little careful that you don't add butters and creams too much to those. Enough to make it palatable, but not so much that you're shifting your diet into something unhealthy. And one of the things I would say, and I'm going to emphasize this, is that when we look at Irish adults, there are quite consistent nutrient deficiencies. So nearly every Irish person is a little vitamin D deficient on average. Not everyone, but the average person. And we're also almost always omega-3 deficient. Both of these nutrients come from oily fish. And Irish people, I don't think for the most part like oily fish. We don't like eating salmon and mackerel. But if you can, if you find it palatable, you should be eating one salmon fillet or one mackerel fillet once or twice a week. That's really good for you. But if you can't, if you just can't stand, oily fish is very pungent. So if you don't like the taste, then take the vitamins. Um, a really good thing to do if you've got the resources and the ability is to do a diet analysis. So this is a diet analysis I did on myself. I'm going to point out some things. So you're supposed to have, say, as a man, about 2,400, 2,500 calories a day. I was having nearly 3,000 calories a day, and that's really common. We overeat a little bit in Ireland, and we're overeating from the wrong foods. We're eating too many carbohydrates and fats. Um, so that's one of the things. Now you can see here, for me, it was too much fat, not enough carbohydrate, and a lot of protein because I was weightlifting. Another thing is omega-3s and saturated fat. We tend to get too much saturated fat. This tends to come from animal fats like butter. We like butter and creams a lot in Ireland. We like our pastries too much in Ireland. But what you would rather get your fats from is omega-3s and polyunsaturated fats. So that's things like your olive oils, your canola oils or rapeseed oil, and also oily fish. So salmon and mackerel, sardines, herring, they're great for you. They're really, really good for you. And if your cholesterol's too high and you actually take your omega-3s, your cholesterol will go down, believe it or not. Especially if you're getting your oils from olive oil and canola oil, things like that, instead of butters. So if you're buttering toast, instead of buttering toast, you can put olive oil on toast, for example. It tastes great. So it's something that you wouldn't think would taste good. So I was eating 3,000 calories a day, and despite that, I was still vitamin D deficient, and I was very vitamin K deficient. And again, I point this out to show you that this is a common thing among Irish people. Irish adults don't eat leafy vegetables much. So if to get vitamin K, you need spinach, kale, or maybe pak choi is one I've started eating. I see Rod squirming his face there at the concept of eating spinach. So yeah, they're bitter. They taste bitter, but they're good for you. So and it's good for the environment as well. So oily fish and kale, there you go. But pak choi is one I've come to like, and it's not too bitter and it tastes great. It's actually slightly sweet. Okay, so last thing I'll touch on is retirement planning for the dentition. So it might interest you to see there that I've spent a lot of time talking about good diet and good exercise despite talking about dentistry. And that's because dentistry is how you might approach your food and your nutrition. But you don't actually need great teeth to get good nutrition. That's my point. But let's say, as the population demographics show, people as we get older are having problems with their teeth. Now, I'd say a certain member of the audience will recognize these teeth, and I won't say any more than that, but this is a standard appearance here for teeth of an older adult, let's say. Let's say they're about 60. They're eroded, they've had fill-ins, and the fill-ins are wearing, down and things like that. What you can do is you could visit a specialist when you get to about between the ages of 65 and 75. In my opinion, a prosthodontist or a periodontist would be good people to visit. And you could get your teeth deep cleaned. And if the teeth are good teeth still, you could have them restored with crowns. Now, as we've mentioned already a few times, these interventions, they are costly to the environment. So a lot of this is resource intensive dentistry. But I would put it to you that, if you maintain your teeth and you are therefore have a functioning dentition and you're making good dietary choices, that this is probably has a net benefit, and it's something that's balanced in its approach. So those are things you can do there. You can take teeth like that and restore them into teeth like this. And those teeth would have a good 20 to 30 year lifespan at a minimum with very well done dentistry with a specialist. I would urge caution. One of the things Rod and I discussed before we came to this meeting is what about people going off to Turkey and getting this done and things like that? And what I would say is that this type of dentistry is definitely specialized, and you need to make sure that the person who's doing this work for you is skilled enough to do it properly. Because it is the case that some people would have crowns and the teeth could last between 5 and 10 years, and they could lose their teeth after that if the crowns are not done to a very high standard. So, with good, well conducted dentistry with a specialist team, you can have teeth that last 30, 40, and 50 years, and that's very well proven with research. So I would urge you caution, just make sure that who you're seeing as a specialist is my own opinion. And that's what those crowns look like. They're made on gypsum models, which is a type of stone, and they're porcelain crowns with a little gold unit there. That's good, sensible dentistry for an older adult. Another thing you can do is a thing called the SDA concept, which is called shortened dental arch, and this is approved by the World Health Organization, the WHO. So it's this concept that, let's say you've got good teeth at the front of your mouth, but the back molars are all getting worn and torn and they're getting gum disease. You can actually take those molars out and leave 10 teeth. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And if you have 10 teeth from the middle to the front of the mouth, there is no measurable functional or aesthetic deficit. Now, you might say, well, I really will like my back teeth, and I understand that. And you might say, I don't want to get my back teeth out, and I understand that too. And I'm not saying that you should get your back teeth out, but what I am saying is that if your very back teeth have problems, it's not a bad idea to consider shortened dental arch as an approach. And that is very environmentally friendly because there's no resource intensive reconstruction happening. And then you might say, okay, well, David, that's all well and good, but I don't have any teeth anymore. They're lost now. Well, there is a standard of care that's globally accepted called the simple implant overdenture approach, or two implant overdentures. That's considered a standard of care. So here's a gentleman who I was treating a few years ago. He's wearing full dentures, upper and lower, and that's a reality for a good 20 to 30% of older adults in Ireland. And that's no, that's within normal limits, especially if you're aged 65 plus. That's what the dentures look like. So they can look very good in the mouth, but when this gentleman takes out the dentures, there's just gums and a tongue, and there's no teeth there. And in fact, if you look at the upper jaw on the left and the lower jaw on the right, you can see that there's some bony ridge remaining, but in the lower jaw, there's just this horseshoe, very thin ridge. And people very frequently report to dentists that they manage okay with their upper denture. Like, it's not great, but they manage okay, but they cannot cope with their lower denture. And if you are feeling that way about yourself, or you know someone who is, there is an absolutely life-changing treatment for people like that called the two implant overdenture approach. It involves a very minor surgery to place two implants in the jaw, and then you can take a person's existing denture on the inside and add two little button fasteners to click the denture into those implants. Now, it's not the same as having your natural teeth, but it is, in terms of bang for your buck, money wise, but also environmental wise, this is probably one of the best things you could do for your dental health if you are missing all of your teeth. And finally, I'll just show you again. I talk the talk, but I walk the walk too. So there's treatment I perform for my own mother. This is the cutting edge approach these days. So my mum had 5 teeth remaining, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And she actually had a few implants placed in her upper jaw. And using a computer, I designed some metal frameworks on a computer screen. And then I was able to mill those in a metal called cobalt chrome. And then I was able to stack ceramic by hand with a brush and water and ceramic powder and put it into a furnace that's like a kiln, like what the same way your mugs and your pottery at home might be made. And you can sinter that and turn it into what's called a metal ceramic restoration. And in my mum's situation on the left, she had those 5 good teeth and she had some decayed teeth at the back. And I replaced those teeth with those implant restorations, implant bridges. And that was how she looked like before, and that's how she looked after. And again, that was a life-changing treatment for her, and it managed to keep her out of having to wear a denture. So that's the kind of thing prosthodontists do, and I show you that just to show that I would do that for my mother, just as I would do that for a patient. But I would hasten to say, environmentally, that would be resource intensive, that approach. And as Christine rightly said, there are problems with getting equitable access to that level of care because it's expensive and the government does not subsidize that. Okay, final message for me. The important message is maintenance. One of the dentists that inspired me in my early career was a dentist called Richard Ibbotson, and he once said, "Nothing lasts forever, and nothing lasts without maintenance." And that's the most important message of this talk. You might be finding, okay, maybe you're caring for a loved one who's in a nursing home, for example, and no one can get in to brush their teeth. There are special brushes called Collis curve brushes, and as you can see here, they've got curved bristles on the outside and straight bristles on the inside, and they can go around teeth and clean every surface properly. And if you have to go in there to help one of your family members, or even to help yourself and get in there and brush the teeth, that's the most important medical intervention that you can do for an older adult. And I use that word medical intervention very carefully because it's not a hygiene intervention. Brushing your teeth is actually a medical intervention. Did you know that? Did you know every morning when you wake up and you brush your teeth, you're performing a medical procedure on yourself? It's not just hygiene, it's a medical procedure. There are special brushes called TP brushes, and I would say to you that this is a game changer. And if you're not using TP brushes, you need to start today. The best time to plant the tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is today. And if you clean in between your teeth, you will radically improve the prognosis of your teeth. And flosses as well, but I would be the first to admit that flosses are very difficult to get in there and you need a lot of manual dexterity. So if you're someone who knits or crochets and you're very good with your manual dexterity, absolutely get in there with flosses. Give it a go. But if you think the TP brushes and the toothbrushes are good enough, then I think they're good enough too. And ladies and gentlemen, that's about 34 minutes. I went 4 minutes over time, so my apologies. But thank you very much for your kind attention today. And I'm going to hand it over to Rod Crichton now.
Fantastic, Dave. That was brilliant. And I should fess up, I was one of those patients that you showed, but which one? Anyway, I believe I have to try and start sharing my screen, and I'll see if I can do this. It may be, let's see. So, let's see. No. Sorry, folks. No, here we are. Fantastic. So I wanted just to say a little bit. I would like to make it clear in no way do I have any comparable academic background as Dave does. I was a general dentist and I worked for many years. So this is a combination of personal experience, rather grouchy reflections on my life, perhaps at times, and also just some little bits of academic research I did. So dental health is whole health. That is the point, I would say. Here's me just before I qualified from Glasgow University in 1983. Poor soul, I didn't know what I was getting into. I went to work in London till 2000, and then from 2001, I had my own practice in Stoneybatter in north central Dublin, which I retired from and sold the practice in 2022. So I'd like to say a little bit, first of all, about filling materials from the environmental aspect. Now, there's two types of fillings, which I'll focus on. The top one, it's described here as a mercury filling. It's more commonly thought of by dentists as an amalgam filling. And believe it or not, it's the same mouth, and the image below, those are white fillings, composite materials. So it shows that you can take the metal fillings out and you have the white fillings and you can hardly see them. So you might think of them as almost like the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde of the mouth. But I might say, well, which is which? Mercury fillings have been around for, well, potentially for over 1,000 years and so on, but they came into use in the Victorian era and were pretty much in use up to early part of this century. But they've been superseded now by the composites. In fact, it's no longer available. Amalgam mercury fillings are no longer available for use in Ireland, and they're being phased out around the world, which is a shame because it was really good stuff to use, very strong and safe. Though amalgam does contain mercury, the mercury was securely locked up within its structure and wasn't being released into the body. Now, free mercury as a vapor and in some other forms is toxic and can lead to death in sufficient dosage, and in various other effects, a lower dosage. Now, this is the Mad Hatter from Alice in Wonderland. And that is supposedly somebody who manifests a thing called erethism. Erethism is the neurological effects of inhalation of mercury vapor over time. Apparently, hat makers used mercury back in the day and were affected. So the Republic of Ireland stopped using amalgam from the start of last year, though it's still available on the island of Ireland in the north up till 2035 because of the quirks of Brexit. Now, amalgam is having to be removed, of course, because some people will still have those fillings and need to replace them. So dentists use water spray and suction to hoover away any mercury vapor that will be released when the filling is drilled out. Now, we've also got another source potentially of mercury vapor, and that's crematoria chimneys. So they do use filters on those to minimize the environmental risk, but I would still probably not build my retirement home downwind of one. So back to these fillings. Composites have come out on top in the fillings war. They make up the majority of the modern white filling. The world has moved on, and I don't think that the average person would accept big grey fillings anymore in their mouth. So composites look pretty when they're done well. They blend in and people like them because they look charming then when they're smiling. There's been a lot of anxiety over the years around amalgams, which there were a number of kind of health scares, which I hope I can reassure you were largely unfounded. White fillings don't generally excite the same response. And I think in part because they look like teeth, so they're seen as more natural. And I would say that unfortunately, we still have certain cultural biases in this modern era where we think we're very sophisticated, and a default thinking maybe because something looks ugly, it's bad. And if something looks pretty, then it's good. As far as white fillings are concerned, you may recall those that joined the webinar a couple of sessions ago when Dr. Jennifer Hayes gave an excellent presentation on microplastics. She mentioned certain elements. One of those is present in composite fillings. Not to get too technical, I won't go into that too much, but basically it can leach out, potentially out of the composites when they're being placed and be absorbed into our bodies. And also composite fillings, as they do contain plastic, of course, wear down more than metal fillings did. And so micro and nanoplastic particles will be ingested by individuals, and some of those particles will be excreted into the wastewater and environment. Now, there's been nowhere near as much research done yet on the toxicities of white composites as compared to studies of amalgam. So we're still basically finding out where we are. And I can understand that might produce some anxiety in people when they think about, well, wait a minute now, what's safe to get in my mouth? I think the evidence is still that it's definitely a material that is safe to use. though we live in a world where there's a constant background concern about plastics and microplastics, and dentistry is not immune to the issues of the real world. There's nothing, as I'm sure Dave concurs, there's nothing better than keeping the natural tooth if your tooth is intact. So to keep the teeth intact throughout your life is the preventive goal. And if you do need a filling, then have the filling, for goodness sake. There's nothing worse than suffering dental discomfort and pain and disability. I'd like to move on to say a little bit about carbon footprints in dental practice. In general, it might be understood that sustainability in dentistry is best served, as we said, by taking a preventative approach. And if you maintain your oral health by good care and not needing interventions, that will limit the amount of requirement to plunder natural resources, pollute the environment, or use fossil fuels in addressing dental issues. Now, here's a pie chart. I know it's a bit small, so I'll just kind of say a little bit about it. This is from some studies done in the UK through the NHS. And the blue and aquamarine sections are the carbon emissions from travel from patients and staff, respectively. The smaller, or rather the larger, so pea green part is on ordering of materials, procuring. So 80% of the footprint is made up between travel and procurement. So to ideally minimize your carbon footprint, a practice that's situated in an area well served by public transport and is readily accessible through active travel would be ideal. It'd be great if practices had the capacity for safe storage of bicycles and easy access for wheelchairs and buggies. Now, unfortunately, remote consultations by screen are of very limited value in dentistry. As you can see from Dave's fantastic work, dentistry is very hands-on, so people do need to attend. As far as procurement is concerned, dental patients are not necessarily in a position to fully comprehend the rationale behind specific purchase choices made by dentists. However, those who attend a dental practice on a regular basis and get to know their dentist and hygienist, etc., should feel empowered to inquire about issues of sustainability. Dentists are required to provide safe and effective treatment, and part of this is ensuring that items of equipment and sundries are fit for purpose. Single-use items and the use of plastic are often unavoidable, though. The reuse or repurposing of some items may not be practical. However, it is reasonable to seek to know that such items will be disposed of in an environmentally responsible manner. And it's also reasonable to want to know that where possible, single-use items are avoided. Now, this is me going to give one of my own personal bugbears here. In my own experience, I found materials in modern dentistry tended over the 40 years or so of my practicing life to increasingly embody a trend for convenience of use over simplicity of delivery. For example, the precursor of a dental cement such as this might have been available in a glass bottle with powder and a glass bottle with a dropper either to dispense water or liquid from, and you could mix those two elements together by hand. Now here it's been repackaged as a disposable clicker pack of two pastes which are automatically mixed together to produce a pre-dosed amount, which usually comes out far in excess of the amount required for your task. And also, when you get to the end of it, it's almost impossible to fully extrude all the material from the clicker. So more product is thrown away, and the cement therefore has to be reordered more often. And then what do you do with the clicker when it's finished with? Do you put it in clinical waste? Which, great, but dentists pay a lot more for clinical waste than they do for grey bin waste. So it could end up just in the grey bin, but it's not contaminated. So in theory, there's no problem with putting it in ordinary rubbish, but for the fact that it is then this extra piece of plastic which cannot be recycled. And also it means you're ordering more of the stuff because you're going through it faster. So that really did that get to me as the increasing amounts of these types of materials in that form. So some areas you could also ask your dentist about. Does the practice have a climate action plan? Do they have solar panels or a heat pump? Have they retrofitted their premises? And if a practice is making strides towards being environmentally active, you could share the positives online and with like-minded individuals to support that business. Now, I will just say a little bit about environmentally friendly oral hygiene aids. Now, you will see options for these in certain outlets. I confess I haven't carried out any particular study of these, and I'm not particularly aware of any other, though they may well exist. So I don't want to pronounce on their value or lack of value. What I would always say is that whatever you're doing, as Dave showed, the interdental TPs, they are a fantastic product. But as far as I know, there's no non-plastic version of those available. But I would thoroughly recommend them too. The use of floss. Floss is plastic again. You've got to think where you put them. You don't flush your floss down the toilet once you're finished with it and so on. But I think you have to always get the thing, the item that does the job best and balance that against its environmental impact and how you're going to dispose of it. I think there's definitely room to investigate this area further, but I'm not able to pronounce any further, as I say. The general point here is that environmental issues are relevant as to where we choose to spend our money in dental care, as indeed elsewhere. Through encouraging proprietors of businesses to take positive action, which will incur costs, these proprietors will in turn pressurize government to fund transition in the green economy. So use your purchasing power with discrimination. So I'd like to finish off with a few reflections just on my life as a practicing dentist in Ireland. As I say, I had my own practice in Stoneybatter in north central Dublin from 2001, and there I am. When I started, the treatments I provided there were split fairly evenly between private care, PRSI care, and medical card. All went well until the financial crash, when the wheels kind of came off public provision of dentistry. The government in 2010 cut back the PRSI scheme, forcing all treatment apart from exam and scaling annually to be private. And the medical card scheme failed or suffered far worse. It was completely gutted. Bear in mind that medical card dentistry is a system set up to deliver dentistry free at point of service to those who are either most medically needy or more commonly extremely financially disadvantaged. In 2010, it was decreed by government that medical card patients would only be entitled to an annual clinical examination. All other care was deemed to be suspended or provided in quotation marks, emergency circumstances only. Now, suspended items included all scaling and cleaning of the teeth and gum health care, unless approval was sought on highly restrictive medical grounds. Now, David has shown just how much importance should be placed on maintaining good gum and support tissue health going forward through life. Through all of this period, from 2010 until 22, 12 years, when emergency circumstances were lifted, the only item of care that was available to patients on a medical card on an unlimited basis were extractions of teeth. Unlimited, of course, until you had no teeth left. Now, the public health system, or the clinics, as it could be described, that treat children up to 16 years of age, are in a bad way currently. I'm not going to say too much more about them, as I never worked them, and also that is a whole area in itself. So, essentially the most disadvantaged in our society, the 1.5 million, and 1.5 million at least, adult medical card holders were given minimal dental support from 2010 to 22. There was no preventative focus whatsoever on the scheme. Provision for dental fillings was very limited. This was a real struggle to provide appropriate care for these people through the 12 years of emergency conditions. Now, you might hope that a government would be advised and agree that when it comes to health, and specifically dental care, that prevention is better than cure. What happened, unfortunately, was that cure was seen as less important than cuts to funding, which dropped 70%, without adjusting for inflation 2009 pre-crash to 2021 on the medical card scheme. People might think they suffer at the hands of dentists, but I'd venture more suffering came from the hands of cost-cutting government apparatchiks. The medical card scheme was finally given a modest boost in 2022. Fees were increased, but due to the effect of many years of dental austerity, only approximately 1/5 of registered dentists are participating in the medical card scheme. The government have lost the room there. Only 25% of medical card holders sought dental treatment in 2025. Gum health has been reintroduced since 2022, but there hasn't been a great take-up. I would venture that the reasoning for that is a combination of governmental neglect and contempt for medical card holders and dental providers. When it comes to Sláinte care and its dental element, the National Oral Health Policy, it's not yet been introduced, despite the Sláinte care report being published in 2017. Dental representative bodies have raised significant concerns about this policy, not least its funding model, which seems to be based upon costings taken from 2007. My prediction, which I hope is unfulfilled, is that the National Oral Health Policy will fail, probably amongst recriminations all around. Now, private dentistry. In the meantime, this has changed massively. It has become part of the beauty and wellness industry, promoted by influencers and media types. It's part of the drive towards obsessive focus on physical appearance, which has infiltrated society in the smartphone era. It is the neoliberal consumerist agenda playing out in mouths and minds. Patients are now consumers who shop around, who have access to more knowledge than ever before, but often lack the capacity to contextualize this knowledge. They commonly have expectations driven by virtual reality simulations, which are not achievable in the real world. And I fear that some younger dentists may be as much part of that world as their patients, sometimes seeking to be the next hot breakout dentist star, showing fabulous work on Instagram. And some patients make poor decisions, as Dave said, by seeking treatment in other jurisdictions, where they think they will save money up front pursuing a dream result, but end up with a nightmare that costs a fortune to try to fix back home. Sadly, sometimes teeth are cut down and wrecked by over-enthusiastic or unscrupulous dentists here and abroad promising to provide the perfect smile. In this, dental consumerism can be seen as the antagonist to care based in prevention, when the result is destruction of personal and planetary biology. Now, I'm nearly there. What you're getting left behind is that dental care should be based on health priorities primarily, not in chasing after aesthetic rainbows or abandoning an underclass to dental disability. State and society should be seeking to democratize provision of dental care for all around prevention-based approaches to the benefit of the person and the planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rod. Very comprehensive and definitely giving that link between justice and climate and health. And thank you very much, David, obviously. I'm aware that Orla is here and with medical knowledge as well around some of the connections between oral health and physio and exercise. I know you had mentioned earlier in the chat, Orla, that you may have something to add. Is this the time when you'd like to say something, or would you prefer to wait till a bit later?
Oh yeah, I was just to add in a few little insights that on the link of oral health. So, for those of you who don't know, if you haven't met me before, my name is Orla. I'm the operations officer with IDE, but I'm also a physiotherapist, and that's my day job. But I've worked a lot with older populations as well, and it was just something that kind of pinged something. Both what David and Rod are linking, like oral health with overall health, and the reason why, or one of the reasons why that oral health can decline as we get older, from a physio perspective, if you think even about the act of brushing teeth, it's quite a fast movement. Without an electric movement, it's quite a fast movement that requires a lot of what we call muscle fasciculation. So the muscles kind of contract and relax really quickly of our hand and of our forearm and of the bicep muscle. So if we're not staying as strong, if we're going through that natural muscle loss, and we're not as active as we used to be, that ability to actually clean the teeth is we fatigue much quicker in our arms. It's just so much more effortful. And then that's kind of a negative feedback loop of the type of food that we eat then. If that starts to spiral down, think of the upper limb strength that we need to like chop food, to chew, to the active mastication in our, like, even if we've like a bit of arthritis in the TMJ, though, the temporomandibular joint up here. Some of that is just natural, but some of that can be it can be maintained by proper strengthening as well, or by maintaining our strength as well. So it's just a little like physio insight as to how that feeds into each other, and then that increased dependence. And if we need somebody else to come and chop our like chop food, or if our food dietary options are restricted, then we don't maintain our nutrition as well, and that just starts to kind of spiral downwards. So that is it in a nutshell. That was just some physio insight I'd like to add, and then that in turn has climate impacts as well. But apologies
Thank
for
you, Orla.
that super quick talk.
That was good. Um, so we've got about 15 minutes left, and our plan was that we were going to have a couple of breakout rooms so people have an opportunity to just connect with each other and to maybe make some observations on the talks and to consider any actions they could take. And then we wanted to have time for questions, which I think is really important when we have all these experts here in the room. Emma Jane, can I ask you for your advice, being an expert in the webinar field, about whether we have time to do both, or whether we need to just say, cut our losses and go for questions? Sorry to put you on the spot, but you just know better about these things than I do.
Not at all. Yeah, I mean, I guess we've only got 15 minutes, so I feel like, yeah, it is quite tight on time. I think perhaps if there was any questions that we wanted to do here in plenary, we should ask for the questions or comments now. Otherwise, then if we have time, if there's nothing to really clarify or no specific questions, we could go into a breakout group, but maybe we just see if that opens up a bit of discussion here. What do you think? If people are happy with that.
I think that's a good idea, unless Rod or you have a different view to that. Happy to go with questions? Okay, let's fire ahead then, because there are some nice, quick, specific questions, which I'm going to just haul out of the chat box, whatever it's called, chat box. And so one of them is that nice symbol. What's the name of that special brush that you mentioned for very elderly people, David, if you don't mind?
It's called a Collis Curve toothbrush, Collis, and then curve. Collis Curve.
Great. And you could probably get that in most pharmacies, or?
You might find it tricky actually to get, unless the pharmacy had a specific dental health focus, but you can certainly ask your pharmacist and they would be able to order them.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you. The other sort of specific or question was around the idea of protein, which I think probably everybody's ears picked up at, but many people, of course, within the environmental movement really try and reduce their animal protein. So there was a questions around tofu and other alternatives to the white meat or fish options.
Absolutely.
We know you're not a dietitian, but maybe you have something to say about that.
Well, no, not at all. This is a really important question, really valid question. And just for the record, I've written a PhD thesis chapter on nutrition and oral health, so it is within my domain to answer. And I would actually say that I spent years eating a vegetarian and vegan diet myself. So I'm allied to the I suppose the values that underpin that question. So what I would say, knowing what I know now, is that the Food Safety Authority of Ireland does make these recommendations for older adults, and it's based on research. So I would definitely emphasize that the research message is that older adults have much higher protein needs than do younger adults. As you get older, you do not absorb the protein as well as you do when you're younger. And especially if you're sedentary, your muscles don't use the protein. So I would say if the horse is leading the cart, what I would say is number one is that you would be exercising some hours a week, maybe 2 hours of weightlifting a week, and maybe 1 or 2 or 3 hours of some sort of cardiovascular exercise a week. And that even applies if you're 60, 70, 80, and 90. Okay. That would be the number one message. If you're doing that exercise, then your body will actually start using the nutrition in a specific way. And with that in mind, those white meat sources would be towards the more environmentally friendly animal protein options. But I would totally agree with you that there's a massive carbon footprint there. So therefore, what do we do? So I totally agree that tofu and peas and legumes are fantastic alternatives. You'll find that the amount of legumes and peas that you would have to eat to meet the protein requirements would very quickly put you into energy overnutrition. So you have a choice to make, okay? You either overeat and become obese, you undereat and become frail, or you be measured and balanced in your approach. And that's the balance that we have to walk. And I'm very sorry for that's quite a complex message to give. I would say that that balance is the main message here, and I would be having sources from a varied source of protein sources every single day. But let's say finally, if you were determined and you said, "No, I am vegan, and vegan is what I am, and I'm not going to be anything other than vegan," then you can absolutely get your nutrition from supplements, and you could, for example, drink protein powders derived from peas, and you can take nutrients as tablets and things like that. I would hasten to say that the food matrix is important. So that's like, it's one thing to take a vitamin, it's another thing to eat carrots and parsnips and legumes and things. That's really important. But there are ways, and there's ways that would suit everyone.
Thank you. Thanks very much, David. That's very honest, and you're not skirting around the issue. And interestingly, the next webinar and the final in this series is around diet and planet. So that'll be really interesting, actually, having had this and to excavate that further. Um, okay, so now, and then the other thing was somebody, oh yeah, Miriam, I think had said there are places that you could possibly buy products that are less environmentally, I suppose, damaging in maybe in health food shops. So that so things for maybe two different sort of toothpaste that maybe not packaged in plastic, or they're made of wood and bamboo, because there's an awful lot of plastic around everything that we seem to purchase around this care of our teeth. I wonder also, are there opportunities, or does anybody know about opportunities for sort of lobbying, the dental organizations to start pushing for alternatives to plastic? I wonder, are any of the big overarching dental organizations doing that? I see that the World Health Organization has views on that, but Rod and David maybe know about that, or Orla, about is there any movement within the powers that be?
Consumer movement, I think, is the thing really that, they do a lot of focus groups and so on, and they can tell from what people ask for. So I think if you make your desires known, it will have an impact. And of course, then they'll balance that against how financially viable it is for big companies to get involved. Now, the thing is, it's a sort of it's a bit of a complex one in a way, because what I would say is you need to have the tool that does the job. You do need to have a good means to clean your teeth and so on. And if it isn't delivering on the job properly, then it's probably not worth having. So that's why I was saying I'd like to see more studies on the quality of some of these products. Some of them will be good and some of them won't be so good. And if they're not being mediated through big companies, then they may not have the quality control that the bigger companies could have. So that would just be my concern. Like, for example, if you take certain things out of a toothpaste to make it a so-called healthy toothpaste, say if you took detergents out, which some people don't like a detergent in their toothpaste, you'll often increase the amount of abrasives that you have in the toothpaste in order to do the cleaning. So that can cause its own problems.
I wonder, I've got a little view on what you're saying there, Rob, but actually I wonder if David wanted to come in. Had you anything else to say there?
Yes, I would just add that sustainability in dentistry is now a key learning domain in the dental schools. And we actually have a professor called Brett Duane in Dublin Dental Hospital who teaches sustainability. And he often studies things like life cycle assessments and things like that. Now, interestingly, as a researcher, Brett has to go where the money is, and believe it or not, despite being a dentist and a dental public health specialist, his research is now on kidney treatments and how they can be improved from an environmental perspective. So it shows you how dentistry sometimes gets pushed to the wayside a little bit. But yes, I would say that this is now our undergrads, as they become dentists, are taught sustainability as a key cornerstone of their education.
Thank you. That's really valuable. I see Orla has put something in the chat box there about carbon footprint of medical materials, which maybe some people might be interested to download there. I also think, though, I would probably argue against the idea of consumer thing, Rod, because I think we have agreed as a country, as a world, that we have to reduce our footprint. And I think what you brought to us earlier is about dental practices having to be part of that as well, having to look at what do we do each day, how do we reduce our footprint?
But you need to, you can reduce your footprint by buying the right thing. And what I'm saying is that you can get the companies to respond to your demands. So that's consumer power. That's what I'm meaning. So.
And it's great actually here that we're making the people even beginning to think about oral health, dental practice as an environmental and justice issue, which many of us would not even have considered putting together. So I think it's the beginnings of, and for me, it's the foothills and the beginnings of these conversations. And this is, yes, Miriam was just saying how interesting the information about pregnant women is, and particularly for those in the global south where food is so limited. And again, this thing of how, we can go so far in perfecting health in the West at sometimes at a cost, and there's so much complexity. I think the conversation really brings us to that complexity of these problems. I feel I'm talking a lot, and I'm wondering if anybody else would like to come in. Put your hand up if you don't want to put it in the chat box. We have a couple of minutes. Or if anybody who's presented wants to say something, or otherwise, we'll go. Did you want to say something there, M and M?
I was going to come in and try and ask as well, just to flag something, just that I've launched a poll just for people. I just see that 4 people have filled it in, but just if others get a chance as we're listening, just to these final comments and things, just before people run off, it's just for us to get a sense of what have we learned, what impact has today had. We heard an awful lot today, and we learned. So I just guess I wanted to flag that opportunity for people to just, if you see it on your screen, a little pop-up, to please please just fill that in. It would be really, 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 really appreciated. I see M&M there. Were you trying to come in to say something? I can unmute you if you'd like, if you're struggling. Yeah, hang on.
Wonderful experience. Thank you so much. So knowledgeable. And I'm going to pass on as much as I can of it to my friends so they put things into practice.
Thank you very much. I don't know, what's your name? Sorry, I don't
Mary Donnelly. I'm the auntie of Dr. Jennifer Hayes that was talking a couple of weeks ago about plastics.
Ah, fantastic. Yes. Thank you very much. That's great. Nice to meet you. I think there's been an awful lot of positive comments in the chat box for the presentation and the issue. I think we do move to the closing now, and I pass on to Rod and to Orla. Perhaps Orla, but Rod, I'll let you lead on this piece. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know, Orla, if you want to come in and say something. I don't want to, you haven't had much time if you want to have something to say.
Don't worry at all, Rod. This has been so fantastic, and thank you so much to David and Rod and for such a wonderful wonderfully informative informative talk. And there's so much that I wasn't aware of. I was really interested in attending because I was like, oh, because this is quite an area that I'm not too well up on. So I'm just delighted to get that experience, but also to thank you so much to Christine as well, and to Emma Jane for organising this. Um, and we hope that you hang around for the ones to come. So the next month is we're doing a talk on sustainable diets. The information will be compiled by one of our colleagues in IDE, Dr. Orla Casey. She's a gastroenterologist, and she's unfortunately not going to be around, or most likely won't be around, because it's the July changeover in medicine. So I will very likely be presenting this, and it is an area of interest for myself. But so I'd be delighted if you join me on that one. It will be on July 16th at 11 o'clock. I think we said 11 o'clock, Rod, wasn't it? I have the whole after the 11 o'clock. Perfect.
So I thank you everyone for attending. I enjoyed it, but then again, I should too, because I was in it. But Dave, fantastic, really interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Orla, for joining us, and thank you also for everything IDE are doing, and for telling us about what is upcoming, and I hope everyone will join us for that. Thanks to Emma Jane and to Friends of the Earth for all their work in supporting us and hosting us. I think that's probably it. Thank you, Christine, and thank you, everybody. We'll see you hopefully on the 16th of July.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.